All right, hello, and welcome to, I guess this is week eight instruction. Happy spring break, but I guess not really. What I'm doing this week with you guys is I'm trying to go a bit lighter this week, just two lecture videos. So, I do hope that you're able to find some time this week to enjoy yourself and take a break, maybe in whatever way that you need to. So let's just get going with this lecture. I wanted to start today with this reminder about the typical American diet. And the reason I'm doing this is because at this point I've graded most of the projects. And based on what I saw, most, not all, but most students, just with this real, short, small project of one day, most students' days were indeed fitting into what would be um, classified as the typical American diet. Not so much when it came to number of calories consumed, but definitely when it came to sodium. Um, a fair number of people also consuming too much total fat, too much saturated fat. Um, Sugars were a little harder to get a look at, but just kind of based on what I was seeing, yeah, it looks like a lot of us are falling into this typical American diet classification. And down here with fiber, yes, definitely. Most students, in fact, too low in fiber. So, I just wanted to remind you of these areas within your personal nutrition to be paying a little additional attention to because they tend to be problematic for most of us. And if we're doing this consistently over time, there can definitely be negative health impacts associated with eating in this way. All right. So, with this particular lecture, we're moving over into this area of the fuel nutrient or the regulatory nutrients. Last week, we talked about carbohydrates, protein, and fats, the fuel nutrients. So, in this lecture, we'll be talking about vitamins, minerals, and water. And once again, the regulatory nutrients do not have caloric value. Okay, so in general, we say that these three are not sources of energy. With that term energy, we're referring to whether or not something has caloric value. Okay, so with this area, the information that I'm giving you is just it's very brief, very concise, and I do try to gear it a little more toward what might be applicable for you, how you could use this information. But with vitamins, just some general information as about vitamins. They do not provide energy for your body. They do, though, allow for the release of energy from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So even though a vitamin does not technically give you energy, if you happen to be deficient or too low in vitamins. Um, some of the deficiency symptoms can include fatigue, tiredness, etc. So it is very possible that you will feel less energetic if you aren't getting adequate vitamin intakes. So, vitamins, we need to make sure we're getting them through our foods or And if that's not happening, maybe through supplementation, taking a multivitamin. And I'm going to say a couple of things about supplementation in a few slides on down this lecture. Um, Vitamins, each vitamin has a specific purpose, a specific role. It does specific things for our body, but in general, the vitamins do help grow tissues, maintain and support reproductive functions, and also maintain and support immune system function. Okay, so with vitamins, how they're categorized are as fat soluble or water soluble. And it's pretty easy to remember which is which if you will just put to memory that the fat soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K, ADEC. So what that means, any other vitamin, if it's not A, D, E, or K, is considered a water soluble vitamin. And and again, I like to take this and make it more applicable, how it can be helpful in understanding which vitamins are fat soluble, which ones are water soluble. Um, well, it can be helpful knowing this because if you are doing supplementation, there are some suggestions that I'm going to give you. Um, Fat soluble vitamins, they're transported by the body's fat cells. They do not tend to be excreted in the urine. So, with a fat soluble vitamin, if you're taking a supplement, if you're supplementing with A, D, E, or K, it will tend to be stored in the body. With the water soluble vitamins, if you're taking a supplement and you take, for example, 100% or all of the vitamin C that you need in the course of a day in the form of a pill, what's going to happen is you're going to excrete a lot of that in your urine. So you really aren't going to be getting that 100%. A lot of it ends up in the toilet. And some of you may have noticed that if you do take a multivitamin, or if you eat a vitamin fortified, for example, cereal, when you go to the bathroom afterwards, when you urinate, you may notice that it's bright yellow. And what has happened is you've just excreted a lot of those vitamins out of your system, those water soluble ones. They also get excreted in the sweat. So, long story short, here with water soluble vitamins, we need to make sure that we're replacing these daily. We need to make sure we're getting these on a daily basis. And with the fat soluble ones, they can be stored for longer periods of time. That doesn't mean that you can just neglect getting proper intake on a daily basis, but they're not as inclined to get excreted through sweat and urine. Um, okay, so with minerals, um, minerals are categorized as macro and micro. And what that actually means is some minerals, the minerals that are macro minerals, we need them in a little larger. Macro, you can think bigger, um, larger quantity each day. And, that larger quantity is 100 milligrams or more. Micro minerals are those minerals that what's recommended is a smaller quantity per day, less than 100 milligrams each day. And so to make this more useful and more relevant, what I wanted to do is highlight a couple of minerals for you. And I'm highlighting here this mineral called potassium. And I mentioned in a previous video when I was talking about your project how very, very few people, at least in my classes, are getting the amount of potassium on a daily basis that they need. Um, in fact, potassium is a mineral that is now included in the nutrition facts label, and it's included for that reason. Most people are not meeting their potassium requirements. And what I've given you here is more specific information about this mineral. Now, you could look up the specific information for each vitamin and each mineral to find out, well, what does that vitamin or mineral do? What are the symptoms that I can experience if I'm not getting enough of it? For example, potassium deficiency, if you're not getting enough potassium, consistently for a long period of time, it's possible that you become deficient. And the symptoms can be muscular weakness, nausea, drowsiness, paralysis, confusion, disruption of cardiac rhythm. Okay. And then, I've listed a few sources. There are many. But, avocados, potatoes, spinach, and bananas are some of the good sources. The thing with potassium is now, if I'm remembering correctly, and I probably should have looked this up, with potassium, I believe that the recommendation, well, I'm not even going to say, but I can tell you, potatoes or banana, a potato or a banana, they're pretty equal in terms of amount of potassium, and you're looking at maybe 400 to 500 milligrams of potassium in a banana, or 400 to 500 milligrams of potassium in a potato. Of course, it's going to depend on the size, and that is not even going to cover 1/5 of your potassium needs for a day. So this one can be a tough one to get, and you really do have to be eating fruits and vegetables um, to get this one. And so if you're one of those people that neglect vegetables on a daily basis, it's going to be really hard to get your potassium. Okay, so that's one mineral I wanted to highlight, and then this other one, which is really the other side of the coin, sodium is considered a mineral, and we tend to consume way too much sodium. And a big reason for that is, as a society, we're consuming many more boxed and canned foods. Um, and anything that has a longer shelf life has to have something in it that's operating as a preservative. And sodium is something that helps preserve foods for longer periods of time. Salt or sodium is also flavor. And this is a good infographic about sodium. 9 out of 10 Americans consume too much sodium. And then, this is telling you in general, where does it come from for us? Now, this is pretty interesting. 3,400 milligrams is the amount of sodium the average American consumes in a day. And then the American Heart Association recommends consuming 1,500 milligrams or less. Now, what they're showing you here is a pretty low recommendation. Um, when you look at nutrition facts labels, especially in the past, and also the My Plate site, for most of you, what you would be told is to keep your sodium intake at 23 or 2,400 milligrams per day or less. So this is a really strict guideline, but we tend to consume at least 1,000 more milligrams of sodium a day than we're supposed to. The infographic is also talking about the risk that's associated with consuming too much sodium. And It's a variety of conditions. Um, I think though over here, this is separated into health risks and what can happen with your appearance. If you're consuming too much sodium, you can end up with more puffiness. It can be around the eyes or more swelling through the fingers, bloating, weight gain. Um, you're going to tend to hang on to fluids if you consume too much sodium. Um, so, you know, really start looking at the nutrition facts label to see how many milligrams of sodium are in one serving. And keep in mind, it depends on which, if you want to go really conservative, think 1500. But what you really see a little more often is that recommendation of not exceeding 23 to 2400. And by the way, your recommendations do change with age, with both vitamins and minerals. For me, I know my sodium recommendation through my plate is actually at 1600 now. And that can be pretty tough unless you're doing all your own cooking, purchasing foods primarily from the produce aisle, and not adding salt to your foods. So yeah, a couple of minerals there just to pay attention to. Potassium, make sure you're getting enough. Sodium, keep an eye on it. Stay below that limit. And so I wanted to come back to the nutrition facts label and point out where you can actually check these out. Sodium, you can see it listed right here. And it's telling you how many milligrams per day. Keep in mind an upper limit of 2300. If you want to stay conservative, 1600, 1500, don't exceed that. And then if you look on down here, this is a part of the nutrition facts label that changed. And this is where they're highlighting areas that are problematic for us, that we tend to not get enough of. And there's one vitamin listed, vitamin D. And a lot of you listed vitamin D as being a deficiency or not getting enough of vitamin D on the day of your project. And I know for me, it's definitely the case. And then there are three minerals being listed to keep your eye on: calcium, iron, and potassium. So, you could always look at labels uh, to help yourself out a bit in determining how good a source this particular food is for these areas that tend to be problem areas. Okay, so with supplementation, um, some recommendations. If you know that you just are not getting the recommended intake of your vitamins and minerals, it would be a good idea to do a multivitamin supplement. Um, you know, most multivitamins that I see are saying that in one pill you're going to get 100%, or sometimes it's way more than 100% of what's recommended in the day. So, what I would like to add to it is you're you're going to have a better chance of actually absorption of those vitamins if you take them in smaller amounts several times throughout the day. So, if you are doing a multivitamin, um, a better way to take it might be to just cut it in half and take half in the morning, half in the evening. Um, or if you're willing to do it, cut it into three pieces: one with breakfast, one piece with breakfast, one piece with lunch, one piece with dinner. That's going to help prevent your body from excreting so much of the water soluble vitamins anyway in the urine. You're going to get a little better absorption. So, something to think about there if you're supplementing. By the way, megadosing, doing excessive doses of vitamins and minerals, is not recommended. And if you do megadosing, there can be some side effects that go with that. One example, if you megadose vitamin C, a side effect of that tends to be diarrhea. So, um, even though it's nice to think that more might be better, that's not always true, and megadosing isn't recommended. Vitamins are never going to be as beneficial as just as, doing a good job with your diet and consuming the right foods. Um, just there are so many benefits that go with foods versus a pill, and one of them is fiber intake. Um, Fruits and vegetables are really great sources of fiber, and if we're deciding, oh, I'll just do a supplement and forget about the fruits and vegetables, for example, you're going to miss out on a lot of your fiber. And another thing I wanted to mention, hopefully all of you are doing yearly physicals. If you're not, it's time to start doing that. Um, and with a yearly physical, they tend to do a blood draw and run a general blood test, and that blood test is actually going to identify if you are deficient in vitamins or minerals. And some of you may have experience with this. Some one that comes up a lot in class is students will say, "Oh yeah, I was deficient in iron, and I'm now anemic." And so they're taking iron supplements. So those blood tests do help identify if you have deficiencies. So I would recommend really start paying attention to lab results. When you have your physical, take a look at those lab results. The doctor, of course, should be or will talk to you if something is not showing up. Um, you know, Not showing up in a healthy range. But I think it's nice to look at them yourself and get familiar with how to read them. It's not incredibly complicated. So go for it. Okay, so the last regulatory nutrient, water. Okay, once again, it's not considered an energy source for the body because there's no caloric value. However, if you don't consume enough water and if you move into this place of dehydration, one of the symptoms of dehydration is feeling fatigued. So this is another one of those things that can be misleading. A lot of people will say, when I consume more water, I just feel more energetic. Well, yeah, you probably do because you're not as dehydrated, but water isn't providing you with calories, so technically not an energy source. Water does a lot of important things for our body, lubricates joints, helps absorb shock, helps regulate body temperature, maintains blood volume, helps transport fluids throughout your body. And I bet a lot of you have heard this before that about 60% of your total body weight is considered to be water. So, making sure that you drink enough water is very, very important. Um, you know, uh, don't wait until you just feel really, really thirsty to drink. Um, I was taught that if you have gotten to the point where you actually are feeling thirsty, you're a little late. So, see if you can develop the habit of drinking water consistently throughout the day. And one last slide here for you, just with regard to water. Well, and I think I may have mentioned this in class when we were meeting face to face. Um, Probably one of the best ways to know if you're staying hydrated is to check the color of your urine. Your urine should be clear to pale yellow. And so if your urine is yellow or a darker yellow, or I mean, heaven forbid, brown, you're actually um, more dehydrated. So drinking enough to keep that urine clear to pale yellow. Okay, so this wraps up the regulatory nutrients. And once again, those are vitamins, minerals, and water. And don't forget to move along to the second lecture this week. It's your last one for the week, just two. And I will talk to you soon. Hope you have a good day.